Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Legacy Wealth Show with Tim Bratz. We talk a little bit about how to make money, how to keep money, and how to make your money make more money working for you. I have a good buddy of mine, Joe McCall, on the line today. Joe, welcome. Excited to have you, bud.
Tim, how are you, man? Thanks. Appreciate it.
Good. Super pumped for the conversation. I know we were talking a little bit offline. Joe and I have a bunch of mutual friends, and Joe's a legend in the real estate industry, has a lot of influence, and does some coaching and teaching, and is an active operator as well. And he's been in the ballgame for how long now, Joe?
I quit my job in 2009 doing real estate full time. So I've been at it for 10 years.
10 years now. Cool, man. And we had a bunch of stuff. We were talking a little bit offline, got some good bullet points on stuff that I want to talk on with Joe, and to extract how he's making money, how he's keeping money, how he's getting his money working for himself. And let's dive in. Joe, can you give everybody a little background on you and how you got started, when you quit your job, what were you doing before, your background, and just high level on some of that stuff?
You know, I quit. I was working as a civil engineer for some large engineering companies building power plants. I went to Iowa State University. Really liked my job. I mean, I liked working on big power plants, but I hated being a number on a badge that I had to swipe every day when I came into the office, right? I hated cubicles. I called it cubic hell.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the corporate ladder. I didn't like where it was leaning. I looked at the middle managers and saw how miserable they were. You know, they're working harder than anybody else. They come in early, the first, they leave last, and they may be making more money on an annual basis, but an hourly basis, like they're not. And I just didn't want to be middle manager ever. And how few seats there are at the top of these corporations, it's just like, I'll never probably make that up there, but like I can run my own business. I really had this entrepreneurial thing of like, I want to work for myself. I want to be my own boss, and not just like be my own boss, but also like be a producer, not a consumer. Right. I didn't think of it in those terms back then, but it was, you know, I've heard this recently, like, and I've been teaching this to my kids. I don't want you to be consumers. I want you to be producers.
Yep.
So that's what I was thinking back then. And started thinking about real estate and reading books and spending a lot of money on education and coaching and courses. Finally, after about 3 years of being a professional student, I started actually making offers and doing marketing and talking to sellers, all that important stuff, right? That I'd been studying about for so long. Finally decided I'm going to start making money. I was sick and tired of spending more money on education and real estate than I was in making money in real estate. And I made a lot of mistakes. Dang, I've made a lot of mistakes, more than most people. And then the market crashed, and then the mistakes became even more obvious and plain to see then. And it took me a long time to scrape out of the hole that I was in when the market crashed. But
what kind of deals were you doing back then? You doing fix and flips?
Well, I did 2 fix and flips. Both lost money on both. I bought and hold I bought with mortgages, bank loans, about 8 properties. And then I had about another 8 or 10 that I bought subject to. And owner financing. So I was buying properties creatively and with traditional financing.
So subject to is when you acquire existing financing, you just take over the payments of the existing.
Just take over the existing
seller.
loan.
Yep.
Right. Cluster. And I was borrowing a ton of money, private money, on these deals. You know, I paid all my private lenders back, except one of them. I'm still paying them back. But like, I came this close to bankruptcy, and by the grace of God, I avoided that. I lost a lot of homes to foreclosures and short sales, and but I never walked away from any of my private lenders. So I think I'm a little proud of that. You know, I took care of my private lenders, and but man, it was close. You know, my assistant at one time lent me money to help bail me out.
Wow.
And, yeah.
Wow. So how has having foreclosures and short sales on your record inhibited you from making money? Because you're still in real estate, obviously. You stayed in real estate. You kept on, figured out how to get on the other side of the coin and start making money when the recession did occur, when housing prices did come down. you figured that out. How did you figure it out? How were you able to still get financing? How were you able to still get, raise private money? Like, what did that look like?
Well, that's a good question. One of the books that was influential to me back then was Who Moved Your Cheese, or Who Moved My Cheese, or whatever that book is.
Yeah.
And it really got me thinking, because the markets go through cycles. And I was starting to see it because I got started studying real estate in 2006. Everything was going up, right? Real estate never went down. You'd read the charts and you'd see like the last 100 years since we started tracking, real estate never went down. It was the safest investment of everything. But then it started going down. And then the market, went down a lot. It's leveled off. That's a great thing about real estate too. I'm getting to the question a roundabout way, but like, real estate's not like the stock market where it changes on a dime and like overnight, instantly, the market's fallen 10%. Real estate's much slower. You may not think about it but back then I remember watching it. Like, you could see the writing on the wall,
right?
6 to 8 months before before the news did. So we could see it on the real estate side, like listings, days on market were going long, inventory was going up. You hear from rehabbers like, man, these houses just aren't selling. And then it wasn't until like 6-12 months after that when the whole thing with Lehman Brothers collapsed and the market crashed and everything just went to hell in a handbasket. So anyway, I started reading Who Moved My Cheese and really thinking about like, what is the market doing? And I really knew back then I didn't want all my eggs in one basket anymore, right? I started really thinking about diversifying, and not just like investments, but like businesses. So I knew back then I wanted to have a business where I could make money in real estate doing deals, but also make money in other avenues like consulting or marketing services, done for you marketing services and software. So I started creating like a publishing company where I started doing podcasts and teaching and selling courses. Then I started doing some consulting, private one-on-one and group coaching and consulting. And then I started doing some done for you marketing services and then a little bit of software for the real estate space. And so my income has been kind of diversified for the last 8 years on those things. And so that allows me, when the market changes, where I can do different things. When the market was at the bottom in 2012 and 2013, tons of money was coming back into the market. I was doing a bunch of wholesaling. Like, I was finding the buyers and it was so easy to find deals for them. And I was making money hand over fist, just doing regular traditional wholesaling. So there's times when I'm doing a lot of lease options, or I do a lot of wholesaling, and I'll never do rehabbing again. I hate rehabbing. But so
everybody gets into real estate because of the HGTV stuff, right? And as soon as you know what you're doing, you're like, I got to get the hell out of rehabbing houses.
It's adult daycare. I heard somebody refer to it as adult daycare. It's
terrible.
I've never met a happy rehabber. I'll just tell you that loves their business and their life. Never. But so one of the things we were talking about was like, okay, now as you have these foreclosures and short sales, and I was in such a bad. I'm a horrible money manager, and like, I was always working so hard to dig ourselves out of this hole, but my head was in the sand, digging in the hole. And I thought I could fix everything, right? Looking back, and I tell this to people all the time, when their business is going down, as you're falling, you're going to hit the ground sometime, right? So like, the sooner you hit the ground, the better.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, because I was at the time trying to fix everything, and I was making pay because I was taking loans over subject to, and I had private lenders. And so I had all this debt obligation, and I started missing my own home mortgage payments. And like, we were 2 months behind before my wife even knew that we were facing short. And then we started getting calls, and she's like, what's going on here? And I'll take care of it. I'm fixing it. Right. Well, I never did miss a mortgage payment on one of my subject twos, right? So like, if you miss a mortgage payment on a subject two where you're taking over someone else's mortgage, they get a 30-day late on their credit, which is like stupid, really bad.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't like subject twos anymore. But so like, it would be day 15 and I'd get the phone calls because the owner who has the mortgage is getting calls from their bank. Joe, when are you going to make the mortgage payment? Don't worry about it. I'm going to do it. And then it'd be like day 30, day 29, hour 24. And I would make that mortgage payment, and I'd pay the late fees, but like, none of my sellers ever got a 30-day late.
Yeah.
But I had to like rob Peter to pay Paul, and I was missing my own mortgage payments. And I should have way earlier on, and this is what I eventually did, but it took me like a year and a half to finally get my head out of the sand. But like, I should have just cut my losses back then. And instead of prolonging this pain out, I should have just tried to go to the banks, work out something. Back then I should have gone to these sellers and say, listen, I can't make next month's mortgage payment. Here is a tenant. Next month, the tenant's going to just send their rent to you, and deeded the property back to them. I should have worked out something earlier with my private lenders and my sellers that I was owner financing with. But it was a disaster. And that stuff that happened affected my credit for the next 7 or 8 years.
Right.
And made it hard.
Getting out of that now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got to be a big weight off your shoulders.
Yes, it is.
What are you seeing? I mean, everybody's saying we're at the peak of a market again, right? Like there's a lot of people doing real estate who shouldn't be doing real estate right now. And usually when that happens, that means we're in such a good market that we're probably at the peak and we're probably gonna be facing a downturn. What are you seeing on that front?
Well, I can make money in any market because I've been making money when it's up and then when it's going down. See, even the crazy thing, when the market was falling, I was having problems because I bought these properties wrong. Like, I was ignoring the fundamentals. I was counting on appreciation, right? And I was also thinking it's okay to just get $100, $200 a month in cash flow.
Right.
So I was ignoring all the fundamentals. I did not buy these properties right. I borrowed too much money. So looking back, I know now if I were to buy a house, even at the height of the market like we're in now, I'm going to be fine when the market crashes or goes down again, because no matter what, people are going to need a roof over their heads, right? I'm not trying to do deals on real expensive homes. I'm not doing rehabs. I'm going to be good. Like, even if my rents go down a little bit or the values fall, I'm still going to have at least really good, solid cash flow, right?
So so two things is what I'm hearing. One, you're buying for cash flow, not speculation.
Exactly. Yes.
It's a big deal, right? I do the exact same thing. And two, you're sticking to like that workforce kind of housing, yes. A, B class, but not luxury A class, more like workforce A class, B class, the areas that when the market's good, everybody can afford. When the market shifts, all those luxury renters move into more of a workforce type housing, right? So you're keeping a high occupancy and you're always underwriting the deals with a lowest common denominator of return on your investment, which is usually just the rental basis. So if you can make it rent correctly, hey, God forbid the market stays strong and you can wholesale it or you can flip it and make twice as much of a return on it, that'd be phenomenal. But at the very least, you got the lowest common denominator of underwriting it. So the cash flow, at least you can maintain the status quo, even if we do go into a downturn.
And I have reserves. I did not have any reserves back then. Because I had 15, 18 properties. And if one went vacant, I lost all of my cash flow, right? So I didn't have the reserves back then that I needed to weather vacancies. And that's so important. People forget that and they don't do it.
How do you hold those? How do you calculate how much in reserves you need and where do you keep them?
Okay, I'll just be transparent. I have one rental property right now and I have some lease options that I'm doing, and I flip a lot of land and I'm doing a lot of wholesaling.
Smart to do at the peak of the market, right? Smart to
I love wholesaling. Buy
on terms, smart to wholesale a lot of stuff and not speculate on where values are going. And just do it that way. Good.
Well, at the time I said, I don't want to own another deed ever again. I don't want another deed on another property ever again. So that's why I like lease options. And when the market was falling, I started doing lease options because there was more of an opportunity. There were more motivated sellers, fewer buyers that could actually get mortgages. And but anyway, like for me though, I want to see at least 3 to 6 months of reserves of any property, that whether I'm owning it with a bank loan or free and clear or as a lease option, right? You want to have at least 3 to 6 months of reserves for each property so that, if you have a vacancy, it doesn't stress you out. Because here's the thing, you make really, really bad decisions when you're stressed out.
Yep. You don't think straight.
you don't think straight. You make bad choices and you just freak out. But if you've got that money back there, you can kind of sit back a little bit and not be forced to make rash decisions. And that's so important. If you don't have cash, so what I'm telling people now is like, the market's going, pay off the debts, pay off as much debt as you can, like consumer debt. Obviously there's good debt, bad debt. Pay off all your bad debt and get some cash reserves to weather out the storm. Because sometimes, this is really interesting, people need to understand, when the market shifts, it's not like a buyer's market and then, or a seller's market and then a buyer's market immediately. Like there's a gap. And there's sometimes a 6 to 12 month gap where everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. You've got your sellers, they don't think that their prices have fallen yet. Buyers are thinking prices have fallen now. So there's this big disconnect, what sellers think their house is worth and what buyers, like investor buyers, are willing to pay. And sometimes that kind of takes 6 to 12 months for everybody to realize what's going on.
Yep.
And during that gap, it's important that you have the cash to be ready. And which is another reason why I love wholesaling and lease options, because I'm just flipping paper, right? Like if I can't find a buyer on a deal, that's fine. I walk away from the deal. I walk away from the contract. If I can't find
explain to everybody what your business model is real quick with the lease options, just so everybody understands at a third grade level what you do.
A lease option is where you lease a property with an option to buy it in the future. Okay. And so there's two things that I do with lease options. I will flip the lease option, or sometimes I'll stay in the middle of the lease option. But when I first get a property,
so you'll buy it via a lease with an option to purchase the property from the seller. And then you sandwich it by going and finding a buyer who will pay a little bit more on the lease and pay a little bit more on the purchase price. So it's called a sandwich lease option essentially. And so you'll make a spread on both the monthly payments until they end up buying, and then you'll make a spread on the purchase as well. Right.
Yeah. And it's an option. So it's more flexible.
Yep.
Like if the deal goes bad, I can walk away. Now in my contracts, I tell the seller, I'll give you a 90-day advance notice, but I can walk away. And also I don't start making payments until I find a tenant buyer to live in the home.
Right.
Now, if I don't want to stay in the middle, this is mostly what I do is I just sell my contract to a tenant buyer. I assign my contract to a tenant buyer for, $5 to $10 grand.
Yeah.
Now with wholesaling, it's the same thing. I'm buying, and I'm doing this a lot for land right now, where we'll go out and we buy vacant land for 10 to 15 cents on the dollar out in rural nowhere. And then we sell it for maybe 60 cents on the dollar. And we're buying it cheap and we're selling it cheap, or less cheap. So I love that, because like I'm not obligated to any debt. Now the drawback though is I don't get the passive cash flow, the passive income that you get by owning residential real estate. So I realize that. I'm kind of waiting now for the market to come back down again before I start buying assets, if that makes sense. It took me 7 or 8 years to kind of get out of to fix the mess I was in. Now for the last couple of years, I'm like, man, the market's too hot right now. I'm going to wait.
Right.
So, but I'm wholesaling. And so I'm still making good money just by getting in and out of the deal really fast. And I'm not rehabbing. Let me wholesale a deal to somebody else who's going to rehab it.
Yep. Love it, man. So couple takeaways. One, make sure you have reserves. Yeah. And you keep, let's say, 6 months of reserves, and that's to cover all the operating expenses of the property and the debt service of the property. So whatever your mortgage payments are going to be, and your taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, management, anything like that, while the property sits vacant and is not bringing in any cash flow, you want to say, let's keep 6 months in reserves, just set aside. So you're super safe. You can ride out any sort of storm. It buys you some time to then make good decisions, put better tenants in place, get somebody in there to start covering some of that expense for you.
When you have that, it makes
residential in 6 months, right?
Exactly. So when you have that, it also makes it easier to get financing for your next property. If the bank can see that you've got some cash set aside.
Yeah, you got liquidity, right? Yeah, that's super important. So, and then the other thing is, we see a shift coming. We don't know how hard it is. I think there's a lot of money on the sidelines. I think there's a lot of guys like us who are like just stockpiling cash, ready to pounce when the market shifts. But I think there's so much of that I don't see it, falling off the edge of a cliff like in 08, 09. But I think there will be a cool off. I think there'll be, seller expectations will come back to normal. I think maybe lending will tighten up a little bit and push out some of the people who aren't as qualified to be buying properties. But who knows? I guess we'll see. Like, nobody has a crystal ball, right? Nobody can, but it is cyclical, and we're going through this whole inverse yield curve, right? Which is always an indicator of a coming recession, just the matter of time of when, right?
I think a big thing too, people need to be really, really careful of is staying away right now. My biggest advice would be stay away from the high-end luxury properties. Because we're starting to see it in St. Louis. It's been in the news for over a year in New York and LA, really high expensive homes staying on the market longer than ever, price drops like crazy. So, but you may think, well, I'm not in New York or I'm not in LA, but we're starting to see this in the Midwest where, like, let's say the median home price in St. Louis is $175,000. You're starting to see like 300,000, 400,000 and up. Things are really slowing down.
Yeah.
Up in the market. And if you think you can go in and rehab and fix a house and get top dollar for it and sell it quickly, you just can't. You got to be super careful. I would say avoid, if I were you, the higher end homes.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I was running some numbers. I was looking at some houses down in Florida and South Carolina, just as a second home for me. And I realized, looking at the different price points, it was still pretty competitive up to, like, down in Florida, everybody's got money. So up to $1 million, $1.5 million, it was still very competitive. As soon as you got over that price point though, 2 million or north of that, typically properties would sit on the market for 6, 9, 12 months at a time. And people would go in and make lowball offers, and they'd sell for 40 cents, 50, 60 cents on the dollar. Pretty amazing. Cause there's a contingent of the baby boomer generation who made a lot of money. Yeah. And they sold their businesses or whatever they did. They went and built these beautiful homes down south or wherever they were living. This is going around all over the country. And then what happens is now they're empty nesters. Now they don't have the ability to go up and down the stairs as much, or they just don't want to. They're looking to kind of downsize. They don't want to heat or cool a home that's that big. And they just want it off their plate.
I have 2 neighbors exactly like that.
Yeah.
They're asking way too much for their property, and it's going to sit on the market forever. But they're just downsizing, and they're not in financial trouble. But they're looking for, they're going to have a hard time selling it. What I see some people doing, though, which is really cool, is they're partnering with these sellers on these nicer homes and doing Airbnbs with them. And they are, instead of just, they're approaching these sellers with like, hey, let's partner together. I'll share, you let me do an Airbnb in your property, and I will share some of my profits with you. So they're approaching these sellers as potential JV partners on doing Airbnbs on their nicer homes, which is a fascinating, I've never done one of those, but that's a fascinating topic for me. I see people doing that right now.
What I like about it is you go from sitting on the opposite sides of the table in that negotiation to all of a sudden saying, hey, we're buddies. We're going to joint venture, right? Let's partner up. And all of a sudden you're on the same side of the table. It's an easier conversation to have that way versus negotiating and trying to go, head to head and bump.
You can also tell the seller, listen, I'll make sure you get the first, $1,500 a month. But then after that, we'll share the profits.
Yeah.
25, 50 or 75 or whatever.
Yeah. I love that. I got some buddies who do a lot of Airbnb stuff. Even here in like Cleveland, Ohio, right? You wouldn't expect that to be, you expect it in Miami, you expect it in Tampa, you expect it in New York and Charleston, South Carolina and San Diego, but you don't expect that in standard Midwest cities, but they have a ton of success with it here. And they're getting, 2.5 to 3 times as much in rent, which essentially goes straight to the bottom line. The operating expenses, the taxes don't change, right? Utilities don't really change. So they're making additional revenue out of that. One of the things that I've warned them about, they're really good about doing this, is not underwriting the deal and buying the house at that higher price point just because they can justify it with the rents that they're getting, still underwriting it at an annual lease term. And then now they're at such a low basis. Now it really makes sense. And the juice is worth the squeeze, right?
Because then you get multiple exit strategies. And that's another important thing that I was ignoring back then. I didn't give myself multiple exit strategies. So
yeah, I love that. Well, I mean, options, right? The more options you have, the better you're going to be. I was in a golf tournament. We were hitting in a scramble, and there's 4 guys hitting a ball, and we have 4 different options, right? And just by having different options, by default, you're going to lead to better quality, or at least better potential of quality, right? So the more quantity you have, the better quality you're going to have as well.
Exactly. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just asking, were you standing behind the ball?
Yeah, this time I was. Good question. I've learned my lesson, right? So tell me a little bit about, I know we were talking offline about this and taxes and paying your personal income taxes. And what happens if you don't pay your personal income taxes? Joe, please dive into this for me.
Let me just say this. It wasn't until a few years ago that I started implementing profit first. And I came really close to getting into a lot of trouble. All right.
What is profit first? Define that for me.
Okay. Profit First is a book written by a guy named Mike McCall. And have you heard of it, Tim?
Yeah, I have.
I have it.
I have it up, but I haven't read it yet.
Oh man, you may not need to read it. You're smart enough. Like you got accountants and bookkeepers that are taking care of all your stuff. But like, the whole idea of profit first is most people have it backwards. We've got our revenue minus expenses equals profit, right? He turns around in the book and says, you should take your revenue minus profit equals expenses. So when you get $1 in, you first take out your profit, and then you take out the tax money. And then whatever's left is what you have to cover your overhead and expenses. It's a real simple, different way of looking at your books and your accounting. Most of us are checkbook entrepreneurs. We just look at the checkbook and see what's in there, and that's what we can spend, right?
Yeah.
And then especially if you're a small business, and this book was written for small business owners, and it's so important because we are not paying ourselves enough money, right? We're not taking any money out for our own profit, and we're always the last ones to get paid. That's just the way we work hard. We put everything on the line. Everything's at risk. Like when we're starting these businesses, and we're the last ones to get paid. A lot of times the small business owners, the assistant who's answering the phone gets paid more than they do.
Yep.
So it's all about like, you need to stop and say, all right, if we're making $1 million this year, I'm going to pay myself 10% profit first. Then I'm going to pay myself a salary. And if I don't have enough to cover all of my overhead after that, after taxes too, then I have too much overhead. I need to figure out either A, how to make more money, or B, how to cut my expenses. So it's a total game changer. And
versus just saying, hey, this is my overhead and I didn't make any money this month, and that's all you got, right?
Yeah.
So that's good.
So I had no idea of the concept of that. And so I was getting into a point, I don't remember, 4 or 5 years ago, where we've adopted 4 kids, and I had a lot of losses that I was writing off for my taxes. So I was getting write-offs for my losses in the taxes. And I was also had a lot of adoption tax credits. So 2 things happened 4 or 5 years ago. I started making a lot of money, and I ran out of my tax credits. And so all of a sudden I was hit with a huge multiple 6-figure tax bill.
Yeah.
Okay. Not multiple 6 figures. It wasn't that bad. But it was a lot of money, more cash than I had. Right. And so then I got to this place where like, oh crap, what am I going to do? So I started paying off my old taxes while not paying my new taxes. And so I started getting in a deeper and deeper hole. And so I thought, this is not good. And so finally, and I won't go into all the details because it's embarrassing. But I was like, I owed the IRS a lot of money, and I kept on paying my old taxes, but I wasn't keeping current with my current taxes. And I had to work out an installment plan with the IRS to pay. And I had to start becoming current on my current taxes. Right. So 3 years ago, I started becoming current on my current taxes, paying off my old taxes. And, what changed though was like, now every dollar that comes in, I take 1% for profit. I take some for my own salary, and I pay myself really well. And then the rest, and then you take some for taxes. And I also put myself on payroll, right? So every 2 weeks I'm getting a salary. The government is taking out their money every 2 weeks. I don't even know how much it is. It's just a lot, like whatever. And then So I'm paying
So that way
my
there's not as much of a surprise at the end of the year,
Oh
right?
man, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't have to worry about that anymore. Now, when my quarterly taxes come due, it's only a few $1,000s that I'm sending just based on kind of where my revenue's at or whatnot.
Yep.
But like, man, if anybody's listening to this and you want some advice, once you start making money, it's not about how much you make. It's about how much you keep. And I remember Jason Medley telling me this 5-6 years ago. Joe, you're starting to make some money now. What are you doing? You got to make sure it's not about what you make. It's about what you keep. And I didn't realize that, the importance of that, until a few years later. Like, it's really important that when a dollar comes in, you're not just going out and spending it on cars. I see so many people on Instagram, Tim, that are going broke, trying to show people that they're not, trying to show broke people that they're not broke.
Yep.
They're going broke, showing broke people that they're not broke.
Buying liabilities instead of assets. It's crazy.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely crazy. And
we all go through it though,
It's going to bite them in the butt though, Tim.
Big time.
It's going to bite them in the butt. Well, fine. That's, whatever they do is up to them. But like, people need to understand, when you make $1 in, you can't just immediately put that into expenses. You've got to take some out for profit. You got to take some out for your salary, and you got to take some out for Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam doesn't care about your problems. Like, I can't go to the IRS and claim hardship for the taxes that I owed, right? I couldn't go to them and say, listen, I'm sorry. I need you to work with me. They're going to be like, okay, where do you live?
Yeah. Where do you live? How much money did you make? Right.
How much money did you make last year? That's a real nice house.
Yeah.
So I drive a 7-year-old Nissan Maxima. My wife has a 4-year-old Buick. So I don't drive super nice cars, but I live in a really nice house. I mean, this house is really nice. It's on the upper small percentage of St. Louis homes. So like, I can't claim a hardship. So it's just like, holy smokes. I wish I would have started Profit First and this whole concept of this stuff way back. And here's the other thing, Tim. If you don't know your numbers, you don't have a real business. Mm-hmm. And I heard people saying that before. Like, if you don't know your numbers, you do not have a real business. And I didn't know my numbers. Every year when I did my taxes back then, it was just like, okay, here are my bank statements. And I'd send them to my accountant. That was, I did and I could get away with that for a while when I had a small little business, and I had so many write-offs. I didn't pay taxes.
Yep.
So anyway, that, when I said at the beginning of this podcast, I've made a lot of mistakes that, I've made a lot of, but I've learned from them.
Yeah. And,
I'm on a mission right now to tell this to people and help them, not buy houses and ignore the fundamentals. Like when they're buying investment properties, to buy them soundly, to have reserves, to have multiple exits, to make sure it cash flows, to make sure you're not over leveraged, to prepare yourself for the worst case. But also, as you start making money, man, you got to make sure you're paying Uncle Sam. You got to make sure your overhead and your expenses are low. You got to live below your means in your business.
Yep.
You got to have a budget for your business. And, man, financial education, a lot of entrepreneurs, man, they're good visionaries, but they don't know their numbers, right? They're out there pounding the pavement. They're bringing in sales. They're crushing it. But like, when you look at their numbers, they have no idea what's going on. So I hired an operations manager. She updates my books every single week. I have meetings with her. I look at my numbers, where the money's coming from, where is it going? I have 3 or 4 different savings accounts now where the money goes into. So I'm not stressed out. Like, how am I going to pay that guy or the IRS or this, so. Because
it's a different bucket for each savings category, right? So you have your taxes bucket, your profit bucket, your, reinvestment bucket, whatever.
So it's stressful talking about. It's no fun talking about it. I don't enjoy this, but it's important. Somebody's got to say it. Like,
did you hire this person, the operations manager? Did you hire them as a full-time employee, or they're more like a fractional person who comes in part-time and just kind of helps you clean everything up?
No, man, I needed somebody full-time. I'm paying her really, really well. And she works from home. She makes more money than she did at her job. She was a manager in a rehab company, making really good money. And so I just knew I had to pay somebody a lot of money to just work for me and not part-time. Now you can buy fractional CFOs. I think that's good. You know, you may not need to hire an operations manager, but at least you need to hire a bookkeeper.
Yep.
That does your books and sets the money aside. You know, if you're into Profit First, they actually have Profit First certified bookkeepers that you can hire that can help you with that stuff. But
and that can be done on a fractional basis too. Like I had a part-time bookkeeper for several years until I brought somebody in-house full-time just a couple of years ago, right? So you don't have to take on, you know, these massive overhead expenses. It's a way that you can keep your overhead low, as we're talking about with Profit First. And then as you grow, you give them a few more hours, and then it gets to a point where, I mean, you're paying higher on an hourly rate for somebody who's fractional, but it gets to a point where then it justifies just bringing somebody in-house on a full-time basis, because now you're going to get a few more hours out of them. But how much of a game changer has it been for you to have an A player on your team to help you balance all that stuff out?
It is an incredible game changer. Just the amount of, because when I hired her, I said, listen, this is what I want you to do. I want you to manage my team. I want you to make sure that I'm putting all this money into these buckets and you're giving me the numbers every week. And, but I want this, I told her what I want to do. And I said, I want you to take care of everything else. So for me in my business, I know where my one thing is, right? Like I know what's the word I'm looking for? My strengths, my weaknesses.
Yeah.
So I know when I focus on my strengths, my business will make a lot of money.
Yep.
So that was her main job description. Like I want to spend all my time focusing on this, which means you need to take care of everything else.
Yep.
I knew she used to work for me as one of my dispositions managers. And I loved working with her because like I wouldn't hear from her unless there was a problem.
Yep.
And when she gave me the problem, she just didn't, she said, well, here's what we should do, I think.
Here's a couple solutions. Here's a couple ideas.
Some solutions. And then when I did meet with her, it was like, okay, here's the paperwork. Here, you need to sign this. You need to sign this check. And like, oh, that was easy. And so I contacted her and I said, I want to hire you. I don't care how much it costs. And so that's what I did. I got pretty lucky.
Yeah. I mean, bringing on A players into your business. I was in Spain for about 3 weeks earlier this year, and I have a couple A players on my team, and I was able to check email every other day for about an hour and everything. And we bought a 200 unit building, a 96 unit building, and a 24 unit building while I was gone over those 3 weeks. Yeah. Everything was handled. Everything was taken care of. Private money lenders in, closing statements, like everything was done. I didn't have to worry about any of it because I knew it was handled by the A players on my team. And I see a lot of people who are like, let me find the lowest price employee to fill this role on my team. And it's like, listen, pay more for somebody of quality, and it's going to open you up to your unique ability and what your focus and what your drivers are, and take so much of that other stuff off your plate. And by doing that, you're able to just compound your growth and just better quality of life too. You actually like doing what you're good at, right?
Big difference. And that's the word I was looking for, the genius zone. There's a genius zone of where you're good at. And everybody should make a list of what they love, tolerate, and hate. Okay. And write down what you love to do in your business, what you just tolerate, and what you hate. And immediately just eliminate all the hate stuff. Right. And then
sounds like a good job description for your assistant, right?
No, I didn't put it that way, but yeah, that's right. Then the tolerate stuff is the stuff that you outsource.
Yep.
To a virtual assistant. And the love stuff is what you're passionate about. That's what you want to do. That's what gives you energy.
Yep.
So it's important to kind of think about that stuff. Like, what do you love, tolerate, and hate? And eliminate the hate, outsource the tolerate, and focus on the love stuff.
I love it, man. I mean, it's just life's too short to be doing a bunch of crap that you don't want to do. And the reality is the stuff that you tolerate and stuff that you're not good at and stuff that you hate doing, like it takes additional energy and takes like you're not good at it anyways. So why not just staff it out? Somebody else who that is their genius zone is going to be doing it way better, way more efficiently, way more effectively than you can anyways. Like just bring somebody in to handle that. And at the end of the day, by you focusing on what you're really good at, them focusing on what they're really good at, you're going to accomplish more and you know, have higher revenues, have less headaches, have higher quality of life, everything that comes with it.
Yeah, well said.
Good stuff, man. So before we wrap here, I want to hear about how you buy houses, how you buy Are you buying primary residences? And you
Yes.
show people how to buy their primary residence on a lease option too, right?
So I've done this twice. So, because you're an
So
entrepreneur.
give me this trick, and I won't tell anybody, man. Don't worry about it.
Oh. Well, here's the thing. There's so many small business owners, entrepreneurs out there that you're the ball busters out there, right? Like, you're the ones out there taking all this risk to create jobs and to build wealth in this country. Like, we carry the weight of the United States on our shoulders, the small business owners. Like, you look at, I don't remember the numbers, but it's something ridiculous. It's like 75, 80% of all the jobs in the US are held with small business owners, not the Microsofts and Amazons. Got something in my throat. So anyway, the banks though don't care about that. You could have enough cash in the bank to buy a house, but they will not lend you the money if your tax returns don't show a good income. And so as a small business owner, the US is very pro-business in a lot of ways. And so you can write off a lot of deductions. Well, you may be making good money. You want to go buy that $1 million house. Now, though, it becomes a lot more difficult because you have to get a jumbo loan. And you have to have a large down payment, and your credit has to be really stellar. And you need to be showing enough income in your tax returns to be able to get a mortgage to buy the house, if you're going to get a traditional bank loan, right? So what happens though, if you start buying a lot of apartment buildings or starting to take off a lot of write-offs, and you don't show the reported income that you need in your tax returns to get a nice mortgage, well, you're stuck. You're kind of SOL. And then so many small business owners at the same time, they're taking these giant risks. A lot of times the small business owners, like, they have bankruptcies in the past or foreclosures, or they have damaged credit because of a business partnership that went bad, or, they had to take out and borrow some money to make payroll, and then they couldn't ever get out of the problem they were in. So it damaged their credit, or they borrowed too much money on the home equity loan to pay, so for whatever reason, your credit has taken a hit because you're a small business owner and an entrepreneur. So anyway, it gets really hard to get financing on a house, especially if you're wanting to buy a nicer home, $500 to $1 million house, 500,000. You have to, the requirements are that much harder. So anyway, we were at this point where I wanted to get a nice house. We make very good money, but because of the issues I had in the past with foreclosures and short sales, it was still showing up on my credit. There was one time back then, like, I accidentally forgot to make a payment on a student loan. And that's like the worst type of late that you can get next to a house, is a student loan late. And that takes forever. So anyway, I had these little things that were still on my credit from way back, even judgments that I had. There was one time I had a hard time. I couldn't pay a contractor. I did eventually. But they sued me for a judgment. That judgment was on my credit, even though I paid them off, right? So you got to take, that's just a disaster. I took care of that, but like, I wanted to find a nice house, but I couldn't get a good mortgage.
Yep.
So I was doing some marketing. A seller called me and they said, yeah, we can't sell this thing. We already bought another house. They were distressed. They didn't have a ton of equity, and they couldn't make any more than 1 or 2 mortgage payments because they'd already bought another house, and they were stressing out. So I said, what's the address? And I started looking the property up, and I said, you know what? I got good news for you. And they were willing to do a lease option, by the way. And I said, I got good news for you. I think I already have a buyer for your house. And they said, really? Who? And I said, me. And I said, let me call my wife. So I called my wife. This was just as a result of my regular marketing. And we found this great house that they were willing to lease option to us for 2 years or 3 years. So we negotiated a 3-year lease option. We put $3,000 down. This was about a $350,000 house on a cul-de-sac, 5 bedrooms, about 4,500 square feet, nice big fenced backyard, just a really nice house. And we homeschool our kids too, so we need a lot of space. And I need my office. I work from home as well. So we lease optioned that house. They never pulled my credit. They didn't do a background check on me. And I put down only $3,000, which actually was just, I think was the first 2 months rent. And I forget what I was paying them in rent, maybe $2,500 a month or something. And at the end of the 3 years, we decided we don't want to buy this house. again, it's just an option, right? And so I helped the seller actually sell the house, and because I have my license, we helped the seller sell the house, and we waived my side of the commissions. Okay. But so they actually did sell it, and we kept it in really good shape. We also told the seller, we'll take care of all the maintenance and repairs. So you don't have to worry about anything. We're going to take care of the maintenance and repairs and et cetera.
That's a big win. That's a big win for them. It's a big win for you, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So then we went to Europe for 3 months. We just traveled around the country. We took an RV trip somewhere too. I forget, but we took a couple long trips for like 2 or 3 months at a time. And then we came back to the U.S. and we were living in our camper for about 4 months looking for a house. It was stressful. We went from like living luxury Airbnbs all over Europe. Like we went to at least 7 different countries, took an Eastern Mediterranean cruise. We had these furnished flats, apartments. Like anytime you're traveling in Europe with 6 people, you got to get a nice big place that's furnished. Like it's not, well, anyway, we were doing well and I was making money while in Europe. So it was great. We loved it, had a great time. But when we came back, I thought for sure I could get a mortgage, but that stuff was still on there. And then I had this issue with the taxes. So yikes. Well, I knew that I just needed 6 to 12 months to get to a place where I could actually get a good mortgage. And so, but I didn't want to move out of our camper into a house and then 6 to 12 months and move again after that. Right. And that's just, moving is completely stressful. I absolutely hate it. So I started actually sending letters. We knew where we wanted to live. We wanted to live in this nice area. We wanted acreage. We wanted it to be like 10, 15 minutes from our church. So I started sending letters to homeowners that owned properties. And I actually sent the letters from my wife. It was a handwritten yellow letter that said, my husband and I are looking for a house that we can lease for a year or 2 and then buy. We really like your house at blah, blah, blah address. If that would work for you, maybe give us a call. It was a personal handwritten letter, handwritten envelopes, stamps. And I don't remember, we sent 300 or 400 of those letters out. And I got a great response. I got maybe, I forget the exact numbers, 8 to 10 responses. Sellers called me and said, yeah, this is interesting. I targeted people that had owned their house for at least 10 years. They had at least 1 acre and they were in these certain zip codes. And, but none of the houses were exactly what we wanted, because either the backyard was on a real steep slope, or it was on the other side of the state park near where we live. That would have taken us, 20, 30 minutes to get to the closest grocery store or something.
Sure.
So, but I was surprised at how many people responded to that letter saying, yeah, we'd consider that, right? Because they didn't want to go through the hassle of selling it with a realtor and paying the commissions. And so,
were these houses already listed, or?
No, these were just regular homeowners.
Oh, owner occupants, huh?
Yeah, owner occupants. The next thing I started doing is I started contacting realtors. So then we would go after houses that were listed for sale and for rent. And when I started contacting the realtors, I just started calling them. And I was real surprised again, the number of sellers that were open to the idea. But for one reason or another, we'd go look at the house and we didn't like it. Like, we're looking for the house that we want to live in for the next 40, 50 years. So I'm starting to run out of options. I'm freaking out. I'm really starting to pray, God, help us, help us. And then I saw this house on Zillow for sale by owner. And I'd seen this house before, but I thought, now this is out of our price range. There's no way the seller would say yes to this. Like, this is an amazing house. Everything we wanted, on 3 acres, right where we want to be, like 10, 15 minutes from shopping, from our church and everything. And secluded. And it's like, there's no way. But I sent the guy a text. I said, hey, listen, we like this house. We're looking for something, though, that we could rent for maybe a year and then buy. That wouldn't work for you, would it? And the seller said, sure, go look at it. And it had been vacant for a couple of years. He was asking up there. It's up, I won't say the numbers, but it's an expensive house. And it had been vacant. It needed a little bit of work. But, and if you were to see some of my videos, you see some of the views that we have in our backyard. We back to a huge state park, rolling hills. It's in St. Louis, Missouri. It's just beautiful.
So this house that you're living in and talking to me from right now, huh?
Yes.
It's great.
So he said, yeah, he would. And so we did put 10% down, which was a big chunk of money. And we leased it for, it's a crazy story. Like, he was actually sitting on a cash offer from another investor. He rejected the all cash offer with no contingencies for his asking price to do a lease option with us, just because he liked us.
Wow.
And he also had like 3 kids. He had a lot of kids, and he homeschooled his kids. And just, he's a super nice guy, man. I love this guy.
Wow.
And so it was a real miracle. And but so then we leased it for 3 years, and then we bought it. And so I think, you know, it wasn't a rags to riches story, right? Like, because, you know, we were making very good money. We could have rented a very nice house, but we were tired of renting and moving.
Yeah.
We wanted something more permanent and long-term. We weren't in a position where we could get a good mortgage right then and there. So we decided, let's rent first and then buy, but not like move and buy. Let's buy the house that we're renting now. And over the next couple of years too, he allowed us to, I forget the details. A couple times, like, we paid. Well, no, what I'll say is this: we eventually saved 20% for the down payment, which you need for a jumbo loan, which is a lot of money for this house. And then we also during this time, though, we told him we would be responsible for all the maintenance and repairs. So unless it's a tornado, you know, or natural disaster where you need homeowners insurance to cover, we covered all of the maintenance and repairs. He never got a call from us to fix anything. So from his perspective, he won as well. Like, he's getting great rent on this property. It was vacant. We fixed the house up. We put a lot of work into it. And
he's still the one getting depreciation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the disadvantage would be then on our end, we can't write off any depreciation. Well, you can't write off depreciation on a personal residence, but we couldn't write off interest that we were paying on the mortgage. And so we also, if we didn't buy the house, we would have lost all the money we put down up front. So that was something we put up at risk, because this was such a nice house. We did not want to lose this one. And so that's why we did put most of the properties that I do on lease options that I buy, I put 0 down. If anything, maybe $1,000. But it's different when it's your own personal residence.
Yeah, always. Awesome, man. That's a great story. Dude, so much value. I appreciate all the value you've brought, all the value you always bring. And man, thank you so much for being on the Legacy Wealth Show. Any closing words? What does legacy wealth mean to you, by the way? I want to close out with that. Joe, I know I didn't prime you for it, so I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but like, when you think of legacy wealth, you think about your kids, you think about maybe passing down treasure, maybe passing down knowledge. Like, what does that look like for you?
It's a great, great question. I think of legacy wealth. I don't think first of money. You know, I think more in terms of family and relationships. I've always thought I want to be, and this is what I've prayed a lot to God. I said, God, I want to dance with my wife at our grandchildren's wedding. For me, that's legacy wealth. I want to be that old guy with a bunch of grandkids over at their house for family reunion. And one of the grandkids get married and I'm dancing with my wife at their wedding. So like, I think about that a lot. I pray about that a lot. Like, I'm more concerned with passing on not wealth, but knowledge and integrity and character to my kids, so that they can, you know, do whatever they feel God's called them to do, or they can start a business maybe, or,
That's legacy, brother.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, it's important to really write that stuff down and think about it, isn't it? You know, and for me, it's not numbers, it's not dollar signs, it's more dancing with my wife at my grandchildren's wedding. That's the kind
I love it, man. Powerful stuff to end on too. So Joe McCall, appreciate you. Appreciate all the value you bring. Appreciate the audience listening. I know they got a ton of great nuggets out of this. And until next time, brother, thank you so much for being here.
Can I share something?
Yeah, please.
I have a book that people can get if they're interested in lease options.
Yeah, please do. I'm sorry. I should have given that opportunity.
No,
tell people how they can get a hold of you first.
I'll give you 2 ways. Number 1, I have a book on lease options called Wholesaling Lease Options, and you can get it for free. Just pay shipping at WLObook.com. WLObook.com. And then I have a second thing I was just thinking about. I created a little course. It's $97 on how to find deals on Zillow, and it's called the Z Code. And if you go to zcodejoe.com, zcodejoe.com, you can get more information about that. And in there, I teach the same things I was talking about before with finding investment properties and personal residences on Zillow. And I walk through some other sites as well, but Zillow right now is the biggest real estate site on the internet. So it's a real good course. It's $97 and people have been raving about it. It's been getting really good feedback.
Awesome. I will share it in the show notes too, so anybody can plug in that way. So awesome, man. I appreciate it so much. And thank you for being here, and look forward to connecting with you again sometime soon in person too.
We'll see you guys.